And in our main topic this week on Mastering Dungeons, we are looking at the best of Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. We will continue with our look back at 5e adventures by taking on the Hells. Welcome to Baldur's Gate, a city of ambition and corruption situated at the crossroads of the Sword Coast. You've just started your adventuring career, but already you find yourself embroiled in a plot that sprawls from the shadows of Baldur's Gate to the front lines of the plane-spanning Blood War. Do you have what it takes to turn infernal war machines and nefarious contracts against the archdevil Zariel and her diabolical hordes? And can you ever hope to find your way home safely when pitted against the infinite evils of the Nine Hells? All right, standard disclaimer. We are reviewing these adventures to look at what really rocks in them. What stands out? What can we take away as great adventure design? We know that as a whole, some of these adventures we're looking at aren't perfect, and sometimes we don't even think they're very good. But we're trying to stay positive and take away the positive lessons that we can from all of these adventures. All right. So, Teos, let's go to hell.
I'm going to add, Shawn, that someone reached out by email to me and said, hey, I was thinking of going with Tyranny Dragons, and then I heard you review another adventure, and you were very positive about it because you're doing positive reviews. And I thought, wait a minute, maybe they don't actually like it, and I shouldn't buy Tyranny of Dragons. Do you really like it? I thought that was a very funny question. And the reason we're doing this is not because we want to sugarcoat bad, right? It's because actually all of these adventures are super enjoyable, and you can have an amazing campaign with them. And sometimes when we critique things, people misunderstand that our critique means bad, no one should run this, no one can have fun with this. And no, like, I am not a huge fan of Princes of the Apocalypse. I admire various parts of its design, and some of my friends who are designers who I really care about really love that adventure, or other people have had amazing campaigns with it. And so the answer of whether something is bad or not, look, all these 5e adventures are really good compared to historical D&D adventures. It's really about whether it fits your group and whether the work that has to be done, because there's always work, is the work you will like.
There you go. So with that, let's jump into a brief history of Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. It was released in September of 2019. It's the 8th hardback if we count the Waterdeep adventures as a single one. So what else came out that year? Teos?
Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus Dice and Miscellany, which is a great set. It includes a translator for Infernal and lots of other little cards and things. The Dungeons and Dragons versus Rick and Morty box set. The Stranger Things D&D role-playing game starter set, the first one with the really ugly mini that's unpainted and the not great painted one. A version of Tyranny Dragons where Rise and Tiamat were combined. The first one. There have been 2 of these. Ghosts of Saltmarsh came out. Eberron Rising from the Last War came out. The high-priced, almost ridiculed D&D Sapphire Anniversary dice set came out this year. Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, which had come out the previous year, got dice and maps and miscellany that technically dropped this year. And, I feel like there was something else. Acquisitions Incorporated. Yep, this was the era when D&D began to have many, many releases, right? It started a bit the year before, but really this was just, there is a lot, right? Like, that list just makes you realize, wow, it so changed from 2 books to being just so many different types of products.
Yep. In Publishers Weekly, their best-selling books, week ending 9/21/2019, Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus was number 5 in the hardcover nonfiction list, selling over 12,000 units. This book was announced in May of 2019 as part of the Descent event in June, which was held in Los Angeles, and it invited podcasters and streamers and vendors and even organized play folks who generally don't get a lot of attention were invited to come out and join in the festivities. that was my first time as an adult in LA. And it was a really eye-opening experience to see what can be done if you put some funding, but more than funding, some imagination behind an announcement like this and a release party like this. It was great.
Unbelievable. I mean, the main room, so we were there for the organized play part of it, and we ran an epic, which was really fun, with people customizing their war machines and driving all around. And there was a table where I forget the name of the Sirenscape was there, I think, doing like hellish noises throughout the whole event. And the whole room was decorated to feel like you were in the hells. And you know, the big the maps of Avernus were there on each table, and it was just, and then everybody from the AL admins was dressed up in costume, right? James Intercasso was one of the two crow guys, right, walking around, and I forget who was dressed up as all the different people, but it was great. And then just you know, there were actual like war machines in the vendor area and podcasters recording. It was really kind of incredible. And people came dressed in amazing cosplays in addition to the costumes that were put on people. And one of my favorite things was an actor that was immense, really big, super buff dude, played the role of Joe Manganiello's character,
Arcan. Yeah.
And he had Joe's actual axe from his house. And this immense, super strong dude, before we did this segment in a break, he's holding it and he decided to touch the edge with his thumb. Well, you might guess how Joe Manganiello keeps his axe. It's not the way us mortals keep it, you know, unsharpened. No. So this guy's bleeding profusely, and he just looks at me, this enormous man, and just goes like, oh, and I'm like, would you like me to help you with that? He goes, yeah. So I get a first aid kit. I tape up Archon the Cruel's thumb. I bandage it all up. I get him all patched up and feeling good again so he can play the role of Archon. And it was such a good memory.
Yeah. I worked on the event here, the Epic, with James and Will, James Intercasso and Will Doyle. And we had to coordinate with, you know, the acting crew that was going to be there playing these parts. So this went like from some, you know, dude standing on a chair yelling in a convention hall to fully costumed, fully made up professional actors playing these parts and interacting with the players during the Epic. It was astounding.
Yeah, and another funny thing was there's a point in the adventure where you decide whether you deal with Archon the Cruel, and Chris Funk, the singer for the Decemberists, was there playing. He borrowed my dice. I often was working with the talent that was there, and he had a decision to make about what to do, and he ended up deciding in a way that he dealt damage to every single player at the table. And I told him later, because he's from Portland, you probably dealt the most damage in organized play ever. It was a lot of fun. There were so many fun things about that event. And talk about history.
Easily 100 players there, and I think he did like 40 points of damage to every player character. Incredible. So it was great. This was the first adventure book that came with an alternative cover. So they've had alt covers for some of the source books and supplements, but this was the first adventure that got the alt cover treatment from Hydro 74, who went on to do covers for many different books. The credits of this book listed as story, not writers, as story creators. Adam Lee as the lead, James Intercasso, Ari Levitch, Mike Murrows, Lisa Penrose, Chris Perkins, Ben Petrosor, Matthew Cernick, Kate Welsh, Richard Witters, and Shawn Wood. So those were just the people that created the story. Consulting were Joe Manganiello and Jim Zub. And then the writing list includes Bill Benham, M.T. Black, Dan Dillon, Justin Donnie, James J. Hake, James Intercasso, Adam Lee, Chris Lindsay, Leanne Maricel, Sean Merwin, Lisa Penrose, Christopher Perkins, F. Wesley Snyder, Amber Scott, and James Sutter.
That's a strangely long list.
That is a very, very long list, and we will talk more about that long list
Yeah.
later. Inspirational works were listed as Murder in Baldur's Gate, which was a D&D Encounters season at
Mhm.
the end of the run of Encounters. Lords of Darkness, which was a supplement containing many villains. And of course, Tomb of Annihilation, which we talked about last week.
Mhm.
What was going on the side here
A
where,
lot, yeah. So
yeah.
there's an entire AL season providing a parallel story track. We mentioned that epic. You know, one of the things people often say is, "Wow, I wish I could customize my war machine for a war machine." Guess what? An AL you could through that epic, and you could do all kinds of neat things that happened in Avernus in the AL track, and you can still get all those adventures, of course. Beetle and Grimm
Mhm.
had a platinum edition. So they had silver editions. I forget if this was the first platinum. I don't think so, but it was one of the
Mhm.
platinum editions. One of WizKid's finest sets of minis. I have any number of examples of just really neat Fiends minis. I'm holding up a couple. I'll share some more later. But just tons and tons of great stuff that way. The Neverwinter MMO had 2 expansions based on this adventure. And Shawn, I don't know if you heard, there's this thing. It's a video game, a bit of a
Mhm.
sleeper, Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, I've just gotten around to start playing it. It's okay. Uh, so this adventure serves as a prequel to Baldur's Gate 3. And the link between Baldur's Gate 3 and this book is deep
Mhm.
because the entire book was impacted by the decision to create that link partway through the writing of the book. And I think I'm safe to say more than partway through the writing of the
Yeah,
book.
yeah. A lot of words were
Yeah.
thrown out, is what I've always
Mhm.
heard. I wasn't involved in this project at all, but I've heard multiple people tell me in multiple non-NDA capacities about just the incredible amount of work that had been done. That then one of the groups comes in and says, "Hey, everybody, we're going to change this. We're adding Baldur's Gate to it." And because we're going to tie into this video game that they thought was about to release, which of course ended up
Mhm.
being quite the number of years would go by before the video game would actually come out. But that was the idea, is to make this a prequel, and that involved just throwing away a lot of words and bringing in writers to get things in on deadline, and that's always very tough. I All told, when you describe to me that setup, I imagine just a nightmare of a product coming out. And I think this product is really good when you take that all into account. Like, that is really hard for all those writers to do that.
Mhm.
And shout out to the writers that lost their words, because
Mhm.
there's kind of there is little that I dislike more than the fact that I did a ton of work that doesn't get used, when it's not because I
Mhm.
didn't do a good job. It is
Mhm.
a hard blow to take when your words are just not used because of some reason. Those things happen. It's on the company what it does. It's not on you, but those things do happen, and it's really tough to deal with. This is a great product despite of that, and yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the best of this adventure. And as we have in the past, we will start with the premise of the adventure and the approach that the adventure takes. So here is the premise. The holy city of Elturel has disappeared from the Forgotten Realms and descended into Avernus, the first layer of the Nine Hells. This event came about as a result of an infernal bargain between the archdevil Zariel, who rules Avernus, and the treacherous high overseer of Elturel, Thavius Krieg. Zariel is capturing cities and using their citizens as fodder in the ongoing conflict between demons and devils known as the Blood War. Next on Zariel's list of cities is Elturel's neighbor, Baldur's Gate. The characters can be the heroes who descend into Avernus, save Elturel from certain destruction, and prevent a similar fate from befalling Baldur's Gate. This is an adventure for levels 1 to 13.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
Teos, what does this adventure aim to do?
it's trying to do a number of things. It's for sure trying to introduce heroes and fans to Baldur's Gate, right? Establishing that prequel for the video game. If you've played the video game, you quickly latch on to sort of how it works as a prequel. And honestly, reading this adventure again, I can see design through lines where the way it takes, things like, say, like walking through water and the impact of that. The types of characters and the way that they'll often the NPCs will often sort of surrender because they have larger agendas than just fighting. I wonder to what extent this influenced the video game itself, because it does things in a particular way that really is a through line from book to video game. It establishes Baldur's Gate as the dark city that it is, and I love that. Sometimes in the past, D&D forgets what a cesspool of evil Baldur's Gate is, and they pretty it up a bit. And I thought this book really dove into how bad the Flaming Fist are, the city is, any number of aspects about the city. I like that a lot. So the heroes have a plot to uncover involving influential and corrupt families, the leader of Elturel, the dead three cults of Bane, Baal, and Miracle, and Zariel's forces in hell. Then it's going to take you on a tour of Avernus, the first layer of hell. And even though it's the first layer, there's a ton to it. So it really showcases what the hells can be like using just a single layer. The hard choices that you have to make, the deals that devils are trying to make with you. It does a lot to try to provide that to you. The exact things that you will do aren't known, and in what order aren't necessarily known. So there is some freedom there, some openness around the play and how things will result. Maybe you won't free Elturel, right? Those kinds of things. And there's a big part there story-wise around the history of Zariel and Avernus itself, choosing that solution of how much you learn and what you're going to do with that knowledge to try to save one or both cities.
Yeah. So if we look at the background and look at the overview, this is a fairly complex story that involves several noble families and NPCs in the Baldur's Gate section, as well as extraplanar creatures and sentient magic items influencing the path that the characters will take. So let's focus on Zariel first. Zariel was once a Celestial who became convinced that Celestia was failing by not getting involved in the Blood War. So Zariel defied her superiors, started an army made up of supporters in Elturel, particularly a bunch of warriors known as the Hell Riders, and she stormed off into Avernus. The fight did not go well, and many Hell Riders fled. Zariel was captured and taken to Asmodeus, who made her the offer of promoting her to lead Avernus and his troops against the demons who were attacking as part of the Blood War. So she accepted, and so did one of her generals. The others, unfortunately for them, did not. And so they were brought back as Death Knights or forced to serve, or various tragic ends came to them. Zariel never forgot the Hell Riders, though. She made a deal with a priest of Torm named Thavius Krieg, who gave him a magical second sun that would always shine down on Elturel, allowing Krieg to defeat the vampires that had been plaguing the city and become an overlord of the city. This second sun, which was known as the Companion, was destined to one day vanish, and when it did, the city would be taken down into hell. So I'm going to stop there. This idea of the Companion and of Elturel has been around for a long time.
Yeah,
it's been used in other adventures, in organized play, and it's sort of the thing that, if you say, what are some really cool aspects of the Forgotten Realms, different locations? Elturel is one that will be mentioned a lot because of this. It's got a story behind it. Now, none of this other stuff that we're about to talk about was ever mentioned, right? This was not a known. This was something that was dreamed up. As far as I know, something was dreamed up just for this particular adventure. But it is so cool, for me at least, to know this story and then to have that story twisted in this new way, for me, is super cool.
Yeah, and a lot of times the Forgotten Realms sort of doesn't change, right? Tiamat attacks, then she goes away, and it's like everything's normal. A few things happen, right? Neverember isn't an open lord or something like that, but it's often inconsequential. And so to have Elturel's second son, which I thought was always such a neat part about Elturel, revealed to be this temporary deal and ploy, and inside of it is a Solar that's trapped and it's radiance, really neat ideas. And at the end of it, there's no companion. And I think that's kind of a really neat thing. And the Forgotten Realms sometimes need some little bits like that, because the DM can always go back and put it up in the sky if they want. But I thought that was really cool.
All right. So we've got this background of Krieg is evil. He knows that at some point, this demonic or this diabolical contract is going to have to be paid.
Yeah.
So what he does was he invites the Grand Duke of Baldur's Gate, Uldar Ravengard, to visit Elturel, knowing that he would be trapped and be pulled down into hell with the city. Krieg then goes to Baldur's Gate just before Elturel is pulled down into hell. So he leaves a power vacuum in Baldur's Gate and gets rid of a potential foe in the Grand Duke. So Zariel is also working in Baldur's Gate with Duke Thalamra Vanthrampure, one of the city's leaders. The Vanthrampure family has 3 sons, and they all work to erode the city's mercenary watch, the Flaming Fists, by providing money to cultists of the Dead Three. The Dead Three are those 3 death gods, Baal, Bane, and Merkel. So they're trying to destabilize the city and use a powerful shield that holds a pit fiend in it as they prepare the city of Baldur's Gate to also be pulled down into hell with Elturel.
Yeah, which is a lot. It's fun. We've seen these complex plots, right? Where like telling them is, you got to think about how to even like describe what's going on. But in play, again, this works, right? It plays off little by little. And what ends up feeling is a very dynamic feeling of this city has a lot to it. And chapter 1, let's dive right into it. Best of chapter 1, called A Tale of Two Cities. You're going to get hired by the Flaming Fist because all of these refugees are coming in from Elturel. And that is overwhelming the Flaming Fist, which is having to deal with the loss of the Grand Duke. Restraint is vanishing. The Flaming, one of the early scenes you get is your employer punching out people who are trying to protest against the Flaming Fist. And then he wipes his hands off and gives you a job. And now your job is something honorable, which is they can't spare enough people to go deal with the fact that there's a rise in cult activity. But the person hiring you has an in through somebody with possible leads on why these cults are suddenly rising up. So go talk to this spy and figure out what's going on and put an end to it.
Yep. So we see the Fist as the terrible mercenary organization that it is, but it does serve the purpose of being a police force. For better, or most often for better for someone, worse for most. And we do get a good view of what that means to the city. There is good guidance here, and we have clear and compelling hooks. You head to the famous Elf Song Tavern, and if you've played some of the older video games set in Baldur's Gate, you will know what that means. They go there to meet a spy, and then head into a bathhouse, under which is a dungeon of those 3 sons of that noble house.
I played through part of this, only the early part of it, and the bathhouse is really cool. Like I like that you can approach either day or nighttime, and there are different people there, different information to be learned. There are employees there, like masseuses and stuff like that, who can help you out. But ultimately, you need to find the secret door, go down into this cool dungeon, which I feel has a great flavor to it. I think it might have been MT Black that worked on part of this. It's got this neat, many areas are submerged. It feels creepy and evocative as you're going through it. There's a lot to engage players with. Secret doors, submerged dangers, that whole skeletons rise out of the water, things like that. There are assassins that jump you. And it's just a really, really great, neat, evocative dungeon. Near the end of it, you find the first of the 3 brothers, Mortlock Van Thamper, who is a hulking man with a bad burn scar, hated by his brothers. They've decided to take him out of the equation so they can have a larger inheritance. So he's fighting off an assassin that his brothers hired. And so the first thing that happens is the assassin figures out you're here to oppose him. So the assassin runs off, and the brother talks to you, and you get to talk to this guy, and he basically tells you all he knows, which is a smart, kind of interesting way to do it. And then you go face off the assassin and everybody else who's left in this dungeon, and you have to face, one of the first of your choices of, do you let this guy go? Do you force him to face his family and join you? Do you kill him? And you'll have a lot of choices like that with NPCs where surprisingly, and I think it's very welcome, they don't always just fight. They're not just, a lot of the NPCs aren't battles, even though they're pulling all the strings. And that creates actually interesting choices. It's perfect for this kind of adventure. It's good normally, but it's really great. There's even a part you leave the bathhouse, you think everything's fine, right, Shawn?
Yeah, except you now face cultists of Tiamat, because down in hell, Zariel took Tiamat's horde due to the events that happened in Tyranny of Dragons. And now these cultists via Tiamat want their horde back. So do you work with them to take down the Van Thampers, or do you fight them because they're holding out knives and threatening
Evil
you?
cultists, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, there's this dark presence that you can side with, and that will be a recurring theme throughout this adventure, not just in terms of the plot of the adventure, but in terms of diabolical contracts that you can sign. But when you dealt with the brother at the bottom of the bathhouse, he sent you to the Low Lantern, where one of his brothers is. And if you go there, you can meet Amrek. I can't pronounce Van Panther. He works out of the Low Lantern, a gambling and tavern house set within a permanently docked ship. Lots of nice details here. Again, the choice of whether to let Amrek go, kill him, get more information out of him, make a deal with him. But as the heroes leave the Low Lantern, one of the Hell Riders, Rhea Mantlemorn, is coming to speak with Amrek. So again, she can join the PCs, as she more or less wants the same information and wants to find out what happened to Elturel.
Yeah.
She can also give you a little bit more of the history of Elturel in general.
Yeah, and I like that in almost all the parts where you catch up on info are very deliberate, very easy for the DM to run, but with a really cool NPC that if you are good at DMing, you can use that to really make it interesting, right? Like the story of the Hell Riders can play out in an initial part. Later on the road to Candlekeep should tell you more, but it really helps the DM find that voice and help the players understand why they're doing what they're doing. You head to Van Thamper Villa. You might be with Rhea Mantlemorn. You might be with one of the brothers. And here you face the last of the brothers, Thirstwill, aka the smart one, but who is quite frail. He monitors everything with imps that serve him, so he's probably expecting you. You also deal with the mean Tressum, the flying cat called Slobberchops, great name. Glad to betray the family if you feed it, right? Even the flying cat will turn on its friends because it's Baldur's Gate. Thirstwill doesn't put up much of a fight. He'll cast Sacred Flame and then Sanctuary and just hides and hopes his imps will stop you, which they won't. And he will reveal everything. Thavius Krieg is in the dungeon below with my mother. They're plotting to control Baldur's Gate. My brothers and I recently stole the shield of the Hidden Lord, which has a powerful devil named Gargoth inside. Krieg is trying to free it. I have this infernal puzzle box, which belongs to Krieg. Mom told me to hold it and figure it out, but I don't know how to open it. Here it is. And you don't know it yet, but inside is the contract that Thavius Krieg and Zariel signed to doom Elturel. You can explore the villa. There's a sewer dungeon below. Again, very neat with the kind of sewer and stuff, very urban fantasy type thing. You face off against devils, cultists. There's a temple to Zariel, the Duke and Thavius Krieg, a spy named Phalaster Frisk, who works for Silvira Saviax, a tiefling expert on London Hells and Candlekeep. So that sets the stage for where you go next to figure out the puzzle box and so on. And again, you might free Phalaster Frisk to go do that. There are a bunch of other NPCs you find that are prisoners. They're all interesting with quirky stories. And things that paint the fabric of Baldur's Gate life, which I love. And at the very end, once you get out, Liara Portier of the Flaming Fist, who we last met in Tomb of Annihilation, she was in charge of Chult. She's come back and, in fact, learned that adventurers can be quite effective. And so she will make sure that you're willing to go on to the next step, and helps also that if the DM needs a voice to kind of steer characters in the right direction, she can help with that. But it also shows that probably the city will stand longer now that she's here, which also frees you up to go to Candlekeep in case you're that kind of hero that would go, wait a minute, I'm not leaving this city. I'm going to try to fix it. Well, she'll at least try to stabilize it long enough so you can go and figure out what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. And then at Candlekeep, there are more interesting NPCs, such as the little one, the ogre that wears a headband of intellect. You can learn more being Candlekeep. It's a big library. You learn more about the Hell Riders, Avernus, the shield that you have. Then you're sent to Traxagor, the wizard's tower. And he happens to have Lulu the Hollyphant with him. Lulu has temporarily lost her memory, but does remember riding it to hell with Zariel the Celestial and hiding Zariel's sword. But she doesn't remember where or when or really much else beyond that. And this is the setup for the rest of the adventure. And I need to pause here and say, if you are good at taking a linear adventure with perhaps some divergent parts and making it fit your characters, this is a great adventure for you. If you or your players chafe against having to sort of follow a path and have the NPCs be important parts of that, this is not going to be an adventure for you.
Yeah.
Because this is very Star Wars to me. This is very Star Wars, where Luke is not the hero, right? Han Solo's not the hero. Leia's not the hero. R2-D2 is the hero. And all the characters are doing is moving R2-D2 from one important place to another where it can open doors, deal with comms, bring down shields, put up shields, gather information, right? And so in this adventure, you are the team that's delivering Lulu to different places.
And unlocking memories.
Unlocking memories, which then point you to the next direction. So in that sense, it's very linear. But within that linear structure, there are lots and lots and lots of cool things to do. Lots of interesting choices to make, especially closer to the end. So it's you just have to know what you like and be cognizant that this is an adventure that has that sort of pacing.
Yeah. And as you read through it, think through that. So like even things like there are these choices of what you can do. Do you want to save the city this way or that way, for example? How do you break the chains that hold Elturel down in hell? And there are a number of options given. You may want to think of another option or do something completely different. Well, the adventure is really pointing you for one of these choices. And that's where as DM, you have to think through how when you read these, will my group want to play along, or will I be able to work with whatever they improvise, right? Just those are the kinds of things that if your group will chafe and you won't know how to deal with what they want to do, then that can be a tough spot, right? Because the adventure expects sort of a menu of choices, not just anything, because it's an infinite plane, right? There's sort of, in theory, infinite ways to do things, but we can't cover all that ground. So the adventure is trying to give you a few options, which hopefully is open enough for most groups.
And the adventure does that in a lot of places. It says, here are a ton of optional encounters that you could put in front of your characters. So the meat of it is there. You just have to put it together in a way that makes your players feel like they are the ones driving the story, even if you have to rearrange the parts.
Yeah. And Shawn, you worked on chapter 2, Elturel Has Fallen. Elturel has a lot of flavor. This is a city that's down in Avernus. And it is a way to tell, to give insights into Avernus, insights into what's going to happen to Baldur's Gate if nothing's happened. We're going to find Duke Older Ravengard and free him from what he's dealing with. And we're also telling a little bit of the story of, there's some contrast there between sort of heaven and hell. This adventure is full of this contrasting theme, right? Zariel as a celestial, Zariel as an avenging angel turned into devil. You know, the Avernus top layer was once a paradise, but the Blood War has transformed it into this hellish place. And it was a paradise because it trapped you in its paradise nature, not because it was actually good, right? So do you want to talk about the design here and what you liked about it?
It was fun to design in the sense that the characters are now going to one of the worst places you can imagine. And in older versions of D&D, you did not go to an abyssal plane, a hellish plane, until you were super powerful, until you were powerful enough to like ward yourself from the fire damage that you take constantly. And as the editions went on, they got rid of that sort of inhospitable nature. And I use inhospitable in terms of you could not survive there. It's like uncomfortable. So the trick was, how do we show this place is terrible without overwhelming the players right away? And for me, Elturel was the perfect spot for that, because it was in hell, but it wasn't overtaken by hell yet. So the characters are,
and there's a reason for that, right? Like, because of the Blood War.
The Blood War, the Elturel is pulled down, and normally what would happen is the devils would swarm, kill everyone, or capture them, or do whatever that the devils are going to do. But as Elturel is pulled down, a portal opens between the abyss and hell, so demons begin pouring out of the river Styx and start fighting the devils. So the devils now can't get up into Elturel to wreak havoc because they have to fight these demons. And that gives the players the opportunity to get a taste of what adventuring in hell would be like without actually being on the ground. They are up in Elturel. And there are various plots that they can, the art is beautiful that Teos is holding up. The quests are reasonable that the characters can take while in this earth moat that is now Elturel above. So they can rescue Duke Ravengard and get a plan for how to maybe rescue Elturel from the grips that it is. Elturel is being held down from floating away in Avernus by these infernal chains. So after the characters spend 2 levels, level 5 and level 6, rescuing the Duke, they then have to go off and search for the Sword of Zariel, which Lulu and Duke Elturel, who had communicated via psychic means with Baphomet, they both believe that by finding the Sword of Zariel, Elturel might be rescued.
Yeah. And you mentioned the art, and I just want to touch on that because, you know, Horrors Within has really gorgeous art, but man, the art in this book, like, just, I'm holding up this 2-page spread of like the Blood War coming across, and just this entire book is just full of beautiful embellishments, amazing art. It's one of my favorite books when it comes to art, and it really contributes to what, as DM or players, you can get out of it. Yeah, the cities, like, just incredible. Love it, love it, love it. This idea of how you meet Duke Ravengard, I think is like sort of what you're talking about too, where it's like you often get these checkpoints, and it becomes kind of obvious, like, okay, we're getting a checkpoint from an NPC. Here's where we can sort of head next. It's sometimes you figure it out, but often it's because you've unlocked this information, or later that you get these various visions that Lulu gives you, and then that directs you to the next obvious spot. But I think that what you get in exchange is some really amazing set pieces, and that's often the trade-off with when you get into things that are a little bit linear. is that you get these to go to these amazing places in Avernus, really brilliantly designed and conceived, really epic in nature, really interesting NPCs and all of that. And that takes us, I think, to chapter 3, which is really where you begin to explore Avernus itself.
Yeah. Well, at the end of chapter 2, you have to figure out how to get down.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite parts. You have to, now you can climb down the chains, but they do damage because they're infernal and they burn you basically. Or you could find a way to sort of just fall or jump or fly. And so I've had groups parachuting, I've had groups building hang gliders and all sorts of ways to get down. But if you fall straight down, you fall into the river Styx. So you have to find a way to avoid that. But once you get to chapter 3, you know that you need to find the sword. And there are various places that you could go. And the first is Fort Knucklebone, home of the hag called Mad Maggie. And her crew refurbish or rebuild or repair war machines, infernal war machines, the sort of Mad Max feel that this adventure was delivered on. And you can build these war machines that will then take you more quickly across Avernus, since it is an infinite plane of lots of bad things. So after dealing with Fort Knucklebone, you hopefully have a war machine at your disposal. And as you explore, there are various warlords that come after you to try to kill you, steal your war machine, steal your soul coins, etc. Lulu delivers the players first to something called Harriman's Hill, where she thinks that the sword, or at least information about the sword, might be. But this is a false memory. And what's happening there is a vampire who worked with Zariel, who betrayed her, is being tortured by one of her lieutenants. So this vampire is, as Teos is showing you, is impaled on a tree and is just hanging there. But he can't die because sturges are pumping blood into him. So, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you're like, that is gross,
super metal.
but that's also, wow, okay, yeah, that's a hell thing. And the hell of this book is not the sort of just repeated damage or just repeated horror after horror. It's weird, and it's sometimes weird in a funny way. And I think some people chafe against that this plane of hell is not shown like it was in first edition days, that there is this little bit of drama, this little bit of really dark humor to it. It's in a lot of cases. Now, those are the Kenku brothers. Who work at Fort Knucklebone.
Clunk, and they can help you with your war machine and things like that. And and there is some sort of mad humor to Mad Maggie and other aspects. And of course, Lulu is a little bit silly. But there's some classic moments. I think the idea that you're going to get, Lulu's going to get grabbed by hell wasps and taken to a hell wasp nest. Very interesting stuff. The Wandering Emporium is really interesting. This merchant caravan that travels around, run by a Rakshasa called Mahadi, and Mahadi's linked to Lulu's loss of memory. Very interesting.
So when you finally figure out that Lulu she's getting her memories back slowly, there are two paths you can take. You can choose to take the path of demons or the path of devils. So there are essentially 8 encounters. Some of them are really short. Some of them involve a combat, but you can take one of these two paths. And at the end of the path, there is the Bleeding Citadel. And this is where the Sword of Zariel is being kept. So chapter 4 is all about the Sword of Zariel, where you need to get into the Bleeding Citadel. Now, the Bleeding Citadel is this cathedral of positive energy within the negative energy of Avernus. So it has formed a scab around it. And so Avernus is trying to basically bring to heal this cathedral, but the cathedral is holding out. So you have to infiltrate through the scab, get into the place, and then take possession of the Sword of Zariel.
I mean, amazing concept, right? The idea of a place that is good, literally causing the world to scab around it. That's good stuff. Like that is really cool. And I should say that every one of the sections has these sort of like boxes. I always laugh that Wizards loves doing these, like it's all linear, which it always isn't. But what is good about this approach is it tries to really help the DM constantly know, where are we, what's going to happen, what level are we expected to be. And that helps a lot with running each section. And so sections all have those little boxes that show what the steps are, even though there might actually be some parallel movement or lateral movement at times.
As you're about to grab the sword, you are taken back into one of Lulu's memories, and several times you go back into Lulu's memories. This is the final time. And you go back to a time when Zariel was an angel, and she was fighting a war against Ninogu, and you get to take part in that battle. So you have to protect a town called Idyll Glen. Idyll, Idyll, Glen. Yeah, Idyll Glen. So you have to protect the town until Zariel arrives. And there's a good chance your character will die here, but they die in the dream. So there is no penalty for that, except once you clear that dream and survive all the encounters and meet Zariel when she was an angel, if you died and you go back, you cannot be the one to wield the Sword of Zariel. Only those who did not die there can wield it. But when you wield it, it's an artifact, and it changes you. You become a completely different person after wielding that sword, which for some people is super fun because you get to role play. And for some people, it's like, I just want to, have a Vorpal sword and kill things. So, be aware of that. But once you have the sword, it is now time to come to the penultimate or the ultimate decisions. And this is where it gets interesting, because there are really interesting choices and presentations here. This whole adventure has been fairly linear, with a few extras you can throw in or pieces you can move around. And now the adventure says, okay,
what do you want to do?
What do you want to do? And there is no more linear. There is no more set pieces per se. There are a few, but for the most part, it's what do the characters want to do? Chapter 3 may take one persuasion roll. Chapter 5, I'm sorry, may take one persuasion roll to solve everything. Or it may be a several levels long slog, fight, role play, connive, all sorts of things. Do you want to help Zariel keep control of this place? Do you want one of her many, many enemies to take control? Do you want to kill her and leave no one in charge? Right? You have to make that choice. Do you try to bring her back to her angelic self? That's one set of choices. The other set of choices is, what do you do with Elturel? Because getting it out of there is not going to be easy. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. And so you could run another several levels of adventure just removing the chains and then somehow finding a way to bring it back.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we get stat blocks for things like Tiamat, because maybe you're going to work with Tiamat to say, don't you hate what's going on? Help me, help you. Maybe you're going to go free, the trapped entity and the companion, any number of different ways that you might impact this. And so it tries to give you these pieces that you can play with, which I think is pretty cool and sort of neat for ending, in part because by the time you've run all this, you're pretty established as a DM, right? You'll have done a lot, the setting, and so probably your ability to concoct something is pretty welcome, I would expect, from many DMs. I'd be curious to hear what people thought who have run the whole thing. Let us know on the video. I always love hearing about people's campaigns. I think it might be a good approach, right? That maybe you don't just want to say here's the end scene that solves it all. That can be kind of interesting.
Yeah. So that's the adventure, and how it ends is how you want it to end. Then we get some appendices. The first thing we get, speaking of great art, is a gazetteer of Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
So anything that you want to know about Baldur's Gate, they've got you covered. What's the government like? More amazing art. Look at this; it just keeps coming.
Love it.
What are some locations? Who's in charge? What's the social life like? All of that is available through the gazetteer. A map, and a lot of this stuff was released in Murder in Baldur's Gate,
right?
But it revised for this new edition. Anything about the gazetteer that stood out to you?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's basically what was in Murder in Baldur's Gate, which is great. I love pulling that design forward. One of the things that I could say is hey, wait a minute. And you could have taken this out and instead made this a higher level adventure. Because, I mean, when I think of the Hells, I think being really high level. But actually, I think around this time in the game, people were often saying, like, I'm still running Storm King's Thunder. I would like to run Descend to Avernus, but I'm trying to finish up Storm King's Thunder, and I think I want to run Tomb of Annihilation as well. And so I think that it makes sense to have some adventures that have pieces like this that really support play a lot and can find that play to be a little. I mean, you can still spend a really long time on this adventure, so it's not like you're not getting a lot of play. I also like this better than having 4 different parts I may or may not use, as we did. This is my personal feeling. In Storm King or in Waterdeep. I think that it's nice to just have this kind of information in here. That way, if I want to extend Baldur's Gate, I can. The other thing is that as a DM, once you've run this adventure, you'll have a really good feel for Baldur's Gate. And maybe your friends play the video game and so on. Now you're really in a great place to create your own Baldur's Gate adventures. And so given what this book is, where it falls together with what fandom is, it made a lot of sense to put that in here. And we get appendices for diabolical deals, the infernal war machines, which unfortunately could have had more. It has some things on fiendish variations, but I would have loved to have seen the material that's in the epic for Adventurers League be brought in. All kinds of neat magic items and a ton of neat creatures, including some sort of like alternate versions of creatures we've seen before. I think is really nice. And
abyssal chickens.
Abyssal chickens, very important. And lots of like concept art that we see sort of how everything came together. That there's a lot here. Of course, it comes with the poster map, which I have not removed from my book, Shawn, because we
don't want to mar the books.
So I think it's an adventure that, it has received both praise and criticism that I think comes from how it was put together, right? Like that story we talked about, but there is really a ton of epic play here to be had. And if you're the DM that can thread the various parts we talked about, this is just an amazing, amazing adventure that you're not going to forget this, right? This is a very, very epic plot line.
Yep. And I don't really have too much to add to that. So I think we will call this adventure finished. And we hope you enjoyed our review. We hope that you will join us next time. And we want to thank everyone for listening. We want to also thank our patrons, because our patrons are who allow us to continue to do this show. They keep the lights on. They keep the site up. And so we want to thank our Master of Dungeons supporters. In our show notes, we give a special shout out to our Master of Realms supporters. And we have Masters of the Multiverse. They not only get the shout out in our show notes, but they have me mangle their names. So, Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Louis Enders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, David Bastiensen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Bosch John from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges of Alos, Brobo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimbleco, Kevin Davis, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ted and Guyana from Frog Helmet Games, Ben Heisler and Paige Laitman, Simon the Hunter, Shawn Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JR of the Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Kiermandy, Schwill from Maine, Leftstria, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Jaron from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, Michael, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Mountain and Myth Fantasy Maps, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson, creator of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacle Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prunner from Croatia, Joe Rosso, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, David Rideout, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simons, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from Masters of Alchemy, Trace, Ryan Truk, Joe Tyler, Earthworm, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, Vidwokles G, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Wozniak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Ian Wright, and Zewalt Winfrey. Thank you so much. If you would like to join that list of amazing folks, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd. You can also help us out by leaving a review wherever you listen to the show, or go to YouTube at youtube.com/@masteringdungeons and subscribe and comment and do all of those things that help keep us visible. So, Teos, speaking of visible, what have you been up to on your social media?
Well, I've been up to a number of things. I did a review of the Crows playtest and talked about that as sort of first impressions, in addition to playing it on the D20 Play channel. And also on my channel, you will see some reviews of the new Horrors Within book, both what I loved and what I wish would have changed. So enjoy that.
All right. You can find me on the socials at Shawn Merwin, or the podcast on the socials at Mastering D&D. So with that, we have gone to and escaped from hell. So what are we going to do now?
I think I need to go back to my chicken coop and make sure those aren't abyssal chickens. I didn't check carefully enough. No.
Yeah, I've got to scrub the smell of brimstone out of my hair.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. That's not brimstone.
Ooh.